The story continues as usual until class starts. Blade ends up practicing against 2 students, but he simply dodges every single attack. Arnis comes to him and tells him to at least draw his sword against his colleagues. She also mentions that he's disrespecting them because he's not even looking at them while fighting, but Blade simply replies that she looks different. She acts flirty, asking how she looks different to him. Blade thinks of all of the moments she was smiling and acting cute, until he simply replies that he doesn't know. Leonard starts attacking Blade while telling him to notice when a girl changes her hairstyle. Of course, Blade didn't even notice it. Arnis reaches a level of depression that says that she didn't want him to notice, but she goes back to serious mode and tells Blade to keep an eye on Sophie. He notices her practicing by herself and asks Arnis why is it. Arnis says that Sophie always practices by herself, but she usually obeys every command she's given. But she never did something she wanted to, except for the time when she told her name to him. Arnis tells him to deal with Sophie while ordering Leonard to work harder. Blade goes to Sophie, introduces himself, and says that Arnis asked him to watch over her training. Sophie asks if that's a command. Blade ends up confused because that wasn't an order, but she asked him to do it. Still, he simply smiles and tells that he wants to help her. Sophie looks at her fists and says that's all she can use. Blade curiously asks why she doesn't use weapons. She simply replies that she was only taught to use her body to fight. Blade promises to teach her other ways to fight. She asks if it's a command. Blade simply replies he's trying to help a friend, and if she doesn't want to, she doesn't need to learn. She's curious about it and decides to give it a try. Blade prepares to practice with her, but the bell rings, signaling their practical training is over. Blade is flustered because they were about to start. Arnis replies that's because he was flirting. Sophie then looks at Blade and gives him a smile. In the next practical training class, Blade teaches Sophie how to use a sword, but she cannot still cut through the armor. Blade tells her to channel her fighting spirit into the sword, just like she does with her fists. He tells her that a sword is just an extension of her body while demonstrating. She easily understands and manages to cut through the armor. Blade tells that if she keeps going, she will be able to use the sword. He decides to call it for a day, but Sophie asks if she will beat Arnis. Blade replies that getting to Arnis' level won't be easy. Suddenly, Sophie throws the sword back at Blade. He grabs it, but Sophie grabs him and throws him to the floor in the next second. She sits on top of him to restrain him and says this way is stronger. Blade agrees and says that he can't move. She replies, while getting her face closer, that she wouldn't be in a good mount position if the enemy could move freely. Blade agrees, and she tells him that she wants to learn something else from him tomorrow. Blade promises he will do it, but first he must visit the school principal. If you don't remember the king asks how school life is going, to which Blade replies that he made some friends. The king feels relieved because Blade became the hero when he was still 3 years old. Don't ask me how. At this point the king even considers Blade his best friend, but Blade wants to be friends with people around his age. The king is curious and asks who Blade's friends are. Blade mentions he's been lately closer to Sophie. The king isn't surprised. He already expected that Blade would be interested in her. The two comment on how strong she is, but the king states that she's still incomplete. Blade is confused, but the king explains their goal for her completed form was to surpass Blade. Blade gets mad and asks what this is about. The king mocks him for befriending her without knowing she was part of the artificial Great Hero project. Blade is once again confused. The king explains that if Blade the Great Hero can exist, then there's also the possibility to create an artificial Great Hero just like him. He basically explains there's a certain group who used ancient forbidden knowledge to create an artificial hero. They took a test subject with the best aptitude in trying to artificially manifest the Great Hero's powers. To make it worse, they created several clones of her for that experiment, and they used them to make new experiments and adjustments. Blade is confused about the clones because he thought they were thinking about Sophie. The king reveals Sophie's real name is Sophicia Femto. Femto signifies 12, which means she's the 12th clone of Sophicia. Blade's eyes are shaking as he cannot believe the truth. The king continues by saying that the original Sophicia show was treated as an object to be experimented on. Blade angrily gets up, but the king explains that he wasn't involved. Plus he took that organization down. Blade calms down, but the king explains the moment he met Sophie, he took her in and told her that she was free, but she also asked if that was a command, something that hasn't changed since then. Blade rushes back and blames himself because Sophie was robbed of a normal life because they wanted to create a great hero. But now he's decided to make sure she gets her normal life back. The problem is that he doesn't know what's a normal life too. He goes to the infirmary to talk with his medic friend, who's more interested in seeing his body. He asks her what normal means and what's normal for a kid of his age. She's happy that he's curious and she's willing to teach him everything related to the vigor of youth. I'm glad misunderstood her words, because I wouldn't. He goes to Leonard and asks what youth does mean and what it involves. Leonard is also dumb and replies that it means love. Blade dashes away and asks his colleagues what is love and what they do when they're in love. One of them replies that love is about going on dates together. As you guess, it's time for the next victim. He goes to Ernest's room and asks about dates. She misunderstands the whole situation, but due to Blade's insistence, she replies that it's couples spending time alone. They talk, walk around and go shopping, but despite being happily shy about it, she says it's too early for them to go on a date. Blade storms off, telling he will be going on a date. Of course, Ernest wants to know who's the girl stealing her spot. While looking for Sophie, Blade enters the girl's bathroom and asks Sophie on a date. She replies if that's an order. It isn't, but he tells that's important. She smiles and agrees. Of course, girls including Ernest decided to spy on the two while mentioning what happened. The girls are still calling Ernest the Empress, and she tells them to simply call her Ernest. The girls refuse. But Ernest explains their comrades united with one single goal: to keep an eye on Blade and prevent him from doing funny business. I wonder what she means by that. Sophie arrives at the meeting spot on time and tells Blade she doesn't have an idea of what a date is. Blade replies with "Don't worry, I've planned everything." Of course, his agenda sounds more like a mission briefing. The girls think this is too detailed and that it really sounds like a date. He holds onto his arm and they start walking. Ernest and the girls don't like that interaction and end up losing them. Turns out Blade planned to walk around the city, eat some ice cream, visit some spots, run around and even feed the fish. They then go to an arcade to play the punching game. Ernest and the girls are pretty jealous and want to stop them. Why, you ask? Because they destroy the bloody machine. Blade becomes a bit more romantic and the two have to drink from the same fruit at the same time with their straws, but since it's hard to sip, Sophie asks him to get closer to her. Suddenly, Blade jumps away when their faces touch. She asks him what is wrong, but he doesn't understand. Sophie tells him she cannot complete the mission of finishing the drink by herself. He replies that he understands, but his heart is going faster than a race car. They shyly get near each other to finish the drink, and Sophie tells him to get closer. Blade's heart is reaching its limit, but Ernest and the girls are annoyed because they haven't been noticed despite sitting one table away. Ernest's mind is also racing, annoyed by seeing them close. After moving forward with their date, Blade finally starts to feel like someone is following them. They still ignore it and try to move forward with their activities, but Blade notices they're a bit late. Sophie says that it's okay and they will take a shortcut. And by that I mean climbing a building and then jumping among the city buildings, and in the dates, sitting by a fountain where Sophie reveals she had fun today. She then asks why he decided to call her on a date. He wants to tell the truth, but he can't, so he replies that it's because she's his friend. Sophie asks if they're really friends because friends don't keep secrets from each other. Blade thinks he was caught, but she then says that she hasn't told him something. She decides to reveal to him that she isn't a normal human. She explains the whole incomplete test subject story and shows the power she got from it. She says the real hero can change the laws of physics, but she cannot control the power. She falls down and says that she wanted to increase her body weight by 1,000 times. But since she cannot control her power, she actually increased it by 10,000. She also reveals that she can stop time, but she can only use the hero powers for 10 seconds after hearing her whole story. Blade tells her that he won't also keep any secrets from her. She wants to listen to it, and Blade reveals that they used to call him the Great Hero. Sophie doesn't reply and Blade explains he lost his powers. Since she's silent, he asks if she knew already. She replied that she didn't, but she felt something familiar coming from him. He apologizes to her because he is the reason she became a test subject for this cursed power and lost her normal life. Sophie doesn't understand the curse part. Blade explains that the hero's power is a curse. He never wanted to be the great hero, but he had no choice but to fight because they told him that he could use the power to save people. He started to fight monsters when he was only 3 years old. That was the time his powers had awakened. He became strong and almost died several times, but there were still people he couldn't save. People would be angry at him when he couldn't save their loved ones. Blade starts to cry and Sophie runs toward him to comfort him. She says that even if didn't he want to be it, he was still the great hero. She reveals that after being rescued by the king, she went out on a journey to find out who she was. She mentions all the cities he saved and all the people he also saved. He holds her tight while she tells him to be proud. He says that's impossible, but Sophie replies that she is proud that she took part in the artificial great hero experiment because she wants to become someone like him. After hearing those words, Blade decides that he won't be haunted by his past anymore. The two hold hands and promise that they will keep his real identity a secret. That brings the episode to an end.